Hey, good morning everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Unshaven and Unshowered. Papa Wolf coming to you live from Compound W Canine Rescue. Today is September 11th. Never to be a holiday, always to be a day remembered. The theme of today's segment is where were you on 9/11? We have an entire generation from toddlers to 18 years old that don't remember 9/11 the way some of us do, 20, 30, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds. I started my day off with, my wife had left. She was not my wife at the time. Mama Wolf had left the compound, and I just happened to walk through the kitchen, and they were reporting on an aircraft that had flown into Tower 1. At the time, this was live coverage, and at the time they thought it was a private airplane. I thought, well, that's feasible. Kind of hard to miss one of those buildings, but you know, people have heart attacks in the air all the time. Things happen. And as I watched that coverage, that second jet came looping around and right in to Tower 2. And I immediately thought we were at war. And I finished getting ready, and I was the manager of a small little place at the time, and I grabbed a TV. I knew I needed to go open up the store. I grabbed a TV to take with me, and the whole while there I was calling Mama Wolf and explained to her what was happening. Explained to her that if I call and tell her she needs to leave the beach, she needs to leave. I didn't want her stranded. We're a military city. We're right smack in between NAS and Mayport, but I didn't want her stuck on the beach by herself. So I went into the office, and by the time I got plugged in, it was either the Pentagon or Flight, I believe 42, forgive me if I've gotten that wrong, had gone down. And I was just waiting on it to be a little bit closer to home before I called Kimmy and said, come home. And we would figure out what to do from there. We were not married yet, and I'll go back to that. The towers collapsed. I watched that live. There were people there, of course. Nobody that saw it can forget the footage of people jumping from the buildings. But the weekend leading up to 9/11, something pretty amazing happened. I have some friends that are agnostic, atheist, Buddhist, Christians, Muslims. Atheists typically will chalk what we would call a divine intervention up to a coincidence. You know, but who really knows? What I do know, and I have not had time to call anybody and get permission to use names or company names, so it's going to be somewhat generic. But a true story. And
At the time, just before Mama Wolf and I got married, I was in a leadership position of a small little church, Episcopalian church on Fort George Island, St. George. And the folks there were kind enough to send me and sponsor me into a men's retreat called Curcio, held at Camp Weed over by a little closer to Live Oak. We're in Jacksonville. That's a couple hours west of here. It was a wonderful retreat. It was enlightening just to have the fellowship and spend time, share stories, hear about other people's lives. But one of our instructors, one of the leaders of the weekend, needed to leave so he could get back to his office, get back to work Monday morning. And through the course of the weekend, quite a bit of fellowship and sharing was taking place. And he didn't leave when he thought he would. He stayed. He was going to leave, I believe, on Saturday night. He stayed through till Sunday. And we continued our fellowship, continued our learning, continued expanding our awareness of other people in our surroundings and how to represent ourselves. And I'm not always great at that. But he was sure that he could make a red-eye flight out and get to his office. His office was in the towers. He didn't make the flight. It was delayed. And his life was spared. He would have been sitting at his desk in the office in the tower. He's recanted that there was no possible way he wouldn't have been there when the planes hit. So we're always talking about silver linings, and it's hard to when you talk about the devastation of thousands of people. You'll hear some people, including myself, justify, if you will, that maybe there were rapists, maybe there were child molesters, maybe there were people that deserved to die in those towers. But you've got to look at the numbers. You've got to look at what makes sense. And, what are the chances 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or even 100 people that maybe karma was catching up with them? Karma doesn't catch up with 3,000 people. It doesn't include them when it's catching up with a few people. Karma doesn't accidentally run over you when it's trying to run over somebody else. So today should never ever be considered, should never ever be tried to be made a holiday that's ever called a holiday. It should always be a day of observance or remembrance for not only the lives that were lost, people that were just doing their daily grind, but the numerous the numerous numbers of first responders, the bystanders, the folks that instinctively ran into the buildings instead of away from them to help people get out. Everybody would like to think that they're one of those people that would be a hero. But when your feet hit the ground, it is the most unlikeliest of people sometimes that become heroes. It's not the bullies. It's not always the brash talkers, the most popular person. A lot of times it's the person that you've never spoken to that is now saving your life, or somebody you've never paid any attention to, and you see them carrying someone to safety. I know there's different specials and things like that that will air about the towers. I think anyone that wasn't old enough to remember, it should be mandatory. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Don't buy into them usually. Of course, there's a joke about it's not paranoia if they're really after you. I think, though, we would be remiss as a country if we didn't reflect on things leading up to 9/11. And if we were not humbled by 9/11. That is what we should have been. That is what we should still be. We should be humbled by our vulnerability. And that life can be gone from now to the next second. I had an opportunity to speak at that same church in the absence, I can't remember if it was in the absence of a priest. I think it was just an opportunity to speak. And I remember stating that my biggest fear that day was that that was the day that it was going to end, and I would not have had the chance to marry my wife and live my life with her. I had some other stuff written down. But that one thing was my fear, my concern, the one thing I was worried the most about. Not the getting married part, but the making sure that my soon-to-be wife was okay. Even if the whole place blew up later in the day, if we all went down on 9/11, I wanted to be with her. We all got home okay. We all know the rest of the stories, the heroes that surfaced, the enemies that surfaced, our vulnerabilities that surfaced, the rage that surfaced, the retaliation that surfaced, and in quantum numbers, the number of lives that have been lost since then. If I'm lucky enough to have any former or current military personnel watching this video, Thank you. Thank you for your service. I don't care if you have a desk job, if you're flying a drone, or if you're dodging mines. Thank you. Thank you for your service. I had a doctor's appointment this morning and was walking off the elevator. There's a young man, already with a family, couldn't have been 30 years old, in uniform. And I just patted him on the arm and said thank you. And today of all days, if you see somebody in uniform, just say thank you. Police officer, fireman, paramedic, military personnel, thank you. Thank you for saving all of those that could be saved. To all the civilians that became part of the search teams, thank you. For the canines that were successful in searches and lost their lives in searches, thank you. For their handlers, thank you. And for every single person that watches these videos, hoping to hear a little something that might make their day a little bit better, either from education or motivation, thank you for watching. And don't forget to say thank you. That's all.